Alrighty, I have felt like absolute garbage for the last couple days, so I have not been vlogging my movies, but I should start because I'm 3 deep into this latest one, so that's a lot to talk about. So let's just dig into it. So the third film of the month from a MUBI, and third of the year, I guess, would be, is also accurate. Tehran Taboo, which is oddly prescient. Considering certain global events that we're not going to talk about. Let's see here. Ali Suzande? I'm not going to try to say his name, but the director of the film. He's a first-time feature director. He directed a short animated film before this, but otherwise he's worked on various animated projects, and this film is animated. It is a 2017 German production that takes place in Iran, although it was not actually shot in Iran. And it is rotoscoped, so think like a Scanner Darkly as far as the style, a little less wild and bonkers than that, but same basic idea. If you don't know what rotoscoping is, I don't know why you're watching this. It's kind of a weird rabbit hole for you to go down. Anyway, so rotoscoping is just when you shoot practically, you shoot an actual live action subject, and then you animate over that. And by doing that, you allow yourself a little bit more leeway as to what you can visually represent. So for example, Ralph Bakshi, back when he did Wizards, and when he did his Lord of the Rings movies and all that stuff, he used a lot of rotoscoping to get what he wanted. Basically any Ralph Bakshi movie, really, he used rotoscoping. Dude loves rotoscoping. I'm not sure why, but this has 3 stars on MUBI, which is weird. I didn't actually look at the reviews, but 3 stars, guys? Really? This is pretty dope. Like, I'm going to say right off the bat, this is a great movie. It's basically the story of various people. You have Perry, Sarah, Babak, and Danya, and these are all people living in Tehran. It's 3 women, 1 dude, who are dealing with the restrictive policies, the kind of moral policies that are associated with that society in Iran. Perry is a prostitute. She basically, her husband is in jail and won't let her get a divorce, and in order to make money, she is working the streets and is one of our main kind of sources of moral hypocrisy in this world. There's the movie opens with her going down on a taxi driver while her kid's in the backseat. Oh, by the way, she has a kid who's with her like all the time. And the dude sees his daughter holding hands with the boy on the street, and he ends up crashing his car into another car. And it's this very like, oh, okay, so that's where your moral limit is. Your daughter holding hands with some boy while you're getting a blowjob by a prostitute. Cool. In the middle of a work day, by the way. In the middle of a work day. I love the way that this movie represents Tehran as this very restrictive society, which I mean it is, but the way that the world feels so restrictive, there's always someone watching, whether it's police or just some dude nearby, maybe get on a bus or subway or whatever. There's always someone watching, and that's a very, it's kind of a 1984 just, claustrophobic feeling that's very palpable throughout the film. Really, there's a lot of great visuals. Danya, she has sex with Babak, and I'm probably butchering these names, but whatever. She wants him to pay for her to get a hymen regeneration or regenerative, whatever, repair surgery. Anyway, she wants to get a surgery so that she has a hymen again, and so she says because her fiance, when they have sex, he wants her to be virginous, and if she's not, she can get in big trouble. And there's this great image of the shadowy fiance kind of like walking through a crowd, and I don't think you ever actually, I might be wrong, but I don't think you ever actually see the fiance's face in the movie. I might be wrong about that, but it's very strong imagery throughout, and they use the animation process really to their advantage. So it's more than just being able to shoot in Tehran without actually going to Tehran. It's also about creating the most dynamic visuals, and I think that those dynamic visuals really help us as the audience get into the heads of these characters and kind of accept what we're seeing. I think it makes it less foreign, and therefore we really get the feeling of or the horror of the situation these characters are in. Finally, there's also Sarah, who is she's pregnant and she's seeking work. And Sarah's story is probably the most tragic. I'm not going to get into details on that one, but it's all a very tragic story, and if you want resolution, That's actually, oddly enough, there's a theme here. There's not a lot of resolution in any of the movies I'm talking about today. By the end of the film, there's that kind of feeling of your stomach just like dropping because just things are going wrong, and it's a portrait of a really disturbing society. It's also a fairly humorous movie, despite it being super dark. There's a lot of fun to be had. At the end of the day, it adds up to a lot of just like, ugh, but you still get a lot of like little chuckles and laughter along the way. And I think part of that is it's not a very subtle movie, and that might be one of the reasons people have rated it slightly lower than other films. But either which way, it's an unsubtle subject. It's an unsubtle problem to have. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being unsubtle with it. Great movie. Second best of the bunch of the three that I'm talking about today. So definitely watch it before it's gone from MUBI. I think it has 26, 27 more days. I don't know how math works. Beuys from 2017. So Beuys was directed by Andre Viel, who is a filmmaker in Germany. He's a German filmmaker, as being from Germany makes him German. So we have two German films to start off with. Beuys it is a frustratingly esoteric portrait of Joseph Beuys. And Joseph Beuys was a German sculptor and performance artist, and he was a guy. It's hard to really... You get a general idea of who he is from the movie. You get the idea, or the understanding, that he was anti-capitalism. You get the idea that he was very provocative. You get a very basic understanding of a few of his works, most importantly his 7,000 Oaks project. That's the one that gets the most time kind of paid to it, and works as almost a framing device for the story. I called it esoteric. I would say it's too esoteric for its own good. It really feels like it was made for people who are already well aware of Joseph Beuys, which, I mean, if you're going to make a documentary about someone, you might as well make it a little accessible, because you're, explaining someone to an audience. And I really, without Googling it, I wouldn't have really known that much about Joseph Beuys by the end of it. It's a very, it's I think an hour and 40 minutes long. I feel like with that time frame, you should either stick to a very specific subject matter, like, again, the 7,000 Oaks project, where I assume he planted 7,000 oaks. I don't think it actually tells you that he was successful in the project, but 7,000 oaks across Germany, which was it sounds like a very interesting project. I wish I knew more about it after watching the fucking movie. I feel like Beuys is really just a really good troll after watching the movie. He's kind of an anti-artist, like Andy Kaufman, where, he was definitely talented. You see examples of him being talented throughout the film, but then, it never really culminates in an understanding. You hear these talking heads who you really don't know who the fuck they are, explaining like, oh yeah, Beuys, this project of his was like the best. It was, the project of the 20th century. But there's not really an explanation as to why. It comes pretty close in I Like America and America Likes Me, which was he's basically just in a room with a coyote, playing with a coyote. But the film very rapidly just moves on and doesn't actually explain why it was so important. So, great troll. I got that out of the movie, but I don't really get much else. And I think that's the biggest downfall, is I don't, without Googling again, have any real proper understanding as to why he was such an important artist. And I needed that because I'm not German, and I'm not part of the art world. I don't know these things just off the top of my head. At one point Andy Warhol shows up and I'm like, ooh, Andy Warhol, I know him, moving on. Was Beuys kind of pop art kind of person? I don't think so, but again, I can't tell based on what I'm presented with. So a lot of problems there. There is some really good music. It's kind of ambient sounding, a lot of plucked string chords. The editing is interesting. It's misapplied in my opinion, but it's some very interesting editing. If you just want to like pick up some tips and tricks on the old documentary editing game, then check it out. Very interesting stuff. Again, misapplied, but if that's what you're looking for, yeah, it might be interesting to you. Beyond that, like, there's no real context for most of the photos we see. We see finished projects that I'm not sure what the fuck they were meant to be. I don't know how they relate to the time period. I'm not a master. I don't really know 60s, 70s, 80s Germany. I'm not an expert in that stuff. So like a little bit of context would have helped. I'm sure if you live in Germany or you're aware of German history to that extent, or again, part of that art world, you might, you watch all this and it clicks and it's great. But for me, it didn't quite work. Yeah, moving on. The third film, the one I watched today, was Peter Greenaway's The Draughtsman's Contract. This was 1982. Going down. This was right before he did The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, which is a favorite of mine, and I realized today the only Peter Greenaway movie I'd actually seen. And after watching this one, I realized, oh, I just like Peter Greenaway movies. This was my favorite movie that I saw out of the three. It's bonkers. Wigs for days. Sue Blaine, who you might know from Rocky Horror Picture Show, she was the costume designer there. If you've ever done a shadow cast, you know Sue's to blame. And she does some really great work with the costumes here. It's basically just exaggerated 17th century aristocratic garb. And it's wacky shit. Another name to point out before we get into it is Michael Nyman. Michael Nyman, he is a composer and he does some amazing work here. It's all based on classical music of the era. Absolutely dominates all the way through. It sets the scenes perfectly. Between that and the cinematography, which I feel like Peter Greenaway had more to do with that than, let's see, was the credited DP. Curtis Clark. I feel like he has more to do with the visuals than Curtis Clark. I know Peter Greenaway was a painter before he became a filmmaker, and you can definitely see that in the film. Every shot is, it's usually static, and it feels like he's taking it from paintings of the era. You know, he's actually working to make it feel like a painting. The titular draftsman, Neville, is that his name? Mr. Neville. Mr. Neville, he is a draftsman. He's hired to draw this house, this palatial estate, and from various angles. And while there, he also, as part of his contract, he has the homeowner's wife allow him to fuck her on a daily basis, is basically how it works. And then later, the contract is amended. There's a new contract with her daughter, and things go wacky tobacco. It is a wild film. It's a wild, wild movie. Google says that the genres are drama and grotesque, which dope, had me invested right away. Hi, buddy. Hey, pal. Hi, Doge. The film has a uniquely off-putting setup. I'm not going to get too much into the plot because, well, you really should go into this movie not really knowing too much. If you do know too much, then it could just trust me. You want to watch this as fresh as humanly possible. You might notice that the film is a little grainy. That's because it was shot on, I think, Super 16mm, and then it was blown up to 35mm for its theatrical release. I also know that it went through a little bit of restoration at some point, so I'm not sure what the elements were like when that happened, but it's got a bit of a heavy grain structure to it. I personally like that. If that's off-putting to you, then I don't know, you're a weird person, because I don't know who that's off-putting to. I don't even know why I said that. Yeah, it's it's a fun look at literalism. It seems to dislike the aristocratic classes quite a bit, which, if you've seen The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, then you kind of have seen a similar mentality from Peter Greenaway, and I feel like that's a lot of what he does. I know he has at least 2 movies on the Criterion channel right now that are going to be leaving at the end of the month. One of them is Cook, the Thief, the other one from that is Prospero's Books, which, now that I've watched 2 Peter Greenaway movies, I want to watch all the rest, so I'll definitely be checking that out before the end of the month. Yeah, it's a good look, King movie. It's a great film. Check it out, watch it. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm going to cut this a little short because I've got other things to do, and I just crammed 3 movies. Hopefully we can get this down to a vlog per movie. We'll see. I don't know. But until next time, rock and roll, guys.